Hi everyone, welcome to another Reasons and Resources episode. This time we're going to take a look at Lua. And as it says in the title of the video, we're going to be looking at some reasons and resources for learning Lua. And quite a lot of that is, based around my own reasons and the sort of resources I'm certainly going to be leveraging to explore Lua over the coming days, weeks and possibly months. So just to start off, I'll just go through a few typical things that I see mentioned about reasons around or in the same breath as when people talk about the Lua programming language. So Lua's lightweight, it's relatively easy to learn, the syntax is clean and straightforward, and so you might make a case for it being a good choice for a beginner learning a language, maybe. For me, obviously, I'm coming to this a lot later in my language learning timeline, so I can't really speak to it being a good choice for a beginner or not. Myself having, I learned to program using BASIC, so that was my beginner's choice, if you like. But certainly I've heard that mentioned about Lua. It's used in a variety of applications. You might have heard some of the game development applications that it's used in. You might hear names or titles like World of Warcraft come up, or the fact that it's used for Roblox, things like that. Other things, I think a while back I was listening to an episode of Developer Voices, and I think in the context of NeoVim, they were talking about Lua. And so there's also some extensions that it's used with as well. It's fast, and the efficiency that the language has makes it ideal for performance critical applications and where it's sort of embedded into a larger system. And so that way that it can be easily embedded into programming languages and environments is one of the reasons why it's often used as a way of extending applications. And you'll notice, if you go down all the relative rabbit holes that I'm going to talk about, and I'll include links to all of the resources I'm talking about here, you should find there's plenty of resources, and you should be able to sort of work your way through the sort of community aspects of Lua. But we'll sort of touch on some of those as we go through. Now, getting on to my reasons for learning the language, well, one of the reasons is I just love learning new languages. But the other reason, probably the main reason why specifically in the last few weeks I've become interested in the language again, is as a result of getting this book, Programming Language Explorations, which I've done a video for My Life in Objects episode. So you'll see that before this video comes out. And actually on the website for the book, the most recent edition, which is the second edition, you can sort of read some extracts from the book. They've got the introductory chapter 1, and then chapter 2. They don't have the whole of the Lua chapter, but they have a reasonable amount of it, and then some example exercises. There's 26 exercises at the end of the chapter on Lua. So when I do this book, my plan is to just systematically work through the exercises and see how I find it. And then at some point in the future, I'll report back and say, yeah, this was a really good learning experience. Now, this book has multiple other languages, so my project, if you like, going forward for this book is to actually work through the chapters and work through the exercises. That's the plan. It's easily going to turn into, I think, another year project, similar to the year of Brian Eno, that I did, where I read through the Brian Eno book and then went down various rabbit holes. This is a different scenario, of course, because I'm working through examples. So I just need to decide what sort of supporting videos might be helpful for me to do for the channel. But that'll be something a little bit further down the line as I get to grips with chapter 2, the lure one, and just see how that pans out. Because there's a lot of chapters in this book and I don't want to make too much of a rod for my back and it becomes more of a chore than fun. Because for me, the big reason for learning languages is the fun of it. I just love learning languages, learning the difference between the programming languages, like this whole idea of comparative, programming languages. And if I look through the article again, I was thinking of other reasons why I tend to sort of stumble across Lua here and there. And I know when I was looking at languages that are commonly used with game development, because that's something I've never really explored. Also, it always piques my interest when I see other languages where light bulbs go on for, that are influenced by the language or have influenced, or the language has influenced. And one of those is Snowball. So there's two languages that so the moment I see them, they just put on this nostalgia light bulb. And there were two languages which, when I was sort of starting to first dabble in other languages and get interested in stuff outside of the basic that I knew and the tiny bit of Pascal that I'd had to teach myself to do, like a code migration. There were a group of languages which I got discs from the I'm trying to remember the name of the organisation, but there was an organisation that used to publish this would be before the internet really, or before we had internet in the home, where you could send off of a CD and it had this library of, I suppose, what went on to be open source stuff. It was a yellow disc, I seem to remember, and it came with a really cool book as well. I don't know if I still have a copy of it. I should find out if I can still hold on to that and maybe dig it out for a future My Life in Objects episode. But anyway, so around that time I was sort of picking up on different languages, and I can remember, used to send off in the mail for discs when I used to get PC World and magazines like that. And the two that I sent for, then I think before I got hold of this CD, which was a little bit later, were Snowball and Forth, two quite different languages. So whenever I see Snowball or Forth and see that programs have been influenced by those languages, it always, piques my interest. So for me personally, that's another reason to take a look at this. The other thing is I tend to be interested in multi-paradigm languages, or just where maybe there's an interesting feature or restriction in the language which may play to some stuff I've done in other languages. So I noticed, for instance, it says here it has a single native data structure called the table, which is heterogeneous associative array, which can be used to represent things like arrays, sets, lists, and records. So having used languages where data structures were pretty important particularly for data science reasons, I'm always curious as to how other languages handle these sort of things, and what form they take. So it's interesting. I'm interested and curious how putting this or representing them as a single native data structure is going to work out. And then there's some other things that, again, you don't really think a lot about day to day in certain languages, but when you get introduced to other languages, you have to think a little bit more about. So a good example is when I started to learn C and then had to relearn it recently, you suddenly get into the wonderful world of garbage collection and memory management. So it's always interesting in other languages is how much of that stuff do you have to do and get involved with. So yeah. So thoroughly looking forward to going down the Lua rabbit hole and having the support of a good book. My preferred backbone for learning is always a book. I know I'm old school here, but that's my preferred mode of learning. It's a good book and then supplementing by other stuff. So that's going to lead me nicely into a moment, in a moment into the resources. But just before we do that, one final thing. I think whenever you think about reasons, I can't help but have a quick look at how it fits into the grand scheme of things in terms of, the popularity of the language. Also, what sort of returns can you get in terms of if you decide to go into a career in programming as a coder or a software engineer or systems analyst or whatever discipline you find where you're actually having to write code. What sort of languages are worth knowing? And so, as many of you know, I do like the yearly Stack Overflow survey. There are other ones we'll look at as well. But if we look at the most popular technology one for 2024, you can see Lua's down here somewhere. So we've got JavaScript at the top, the usual suspects, and I did an episode where I went through my spreadsheets that I update. And then down here, I think that would still put it in the top 20, wouldn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, yeah. And we get the admired and desired. I don't look at this one so much, but it is interesting to see where it ends up on here. So we've got admired, desired, it's down here. So this is the admired value, 43.6%. This is the desired. Then we get the top paying one. And it's down here. So where is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So it's still inside the top 25. Okay. Then other indexes, which people might be interested in, I include links to these. So there's the Tiobi index, which somewhere here it does explain how it calculates them. So these are more based on scraping, I suppose, website data and various other things to calculate a rating. And I don't know if you notice there, number 30, Pipel, however you say this. Again, they use an index which is basically just based on searches on Google, and there was 20 on that. And then this one, which I don't know how many people check out, I only became aware of it a few years ago. The IEEE run something that is Spectrum, part of their website, where every year they do a analysis of the top programming languages. I'm not sure how they, where is it? Does it say? So they just say they combine multiple metrics from different sources to create 3 meta rankings. So yeah, the Spectrum is the name of their ranking, weighted towards the profile of the typical IEE member. The trending ranking seeks to spot languages that are in the zeitgeist, and the jobs ranking measures what employers are looking for. So they can see, you can sort of see here, you've got Spectrum, trending, jobs. Okay, so on the Spectrum, it's down here. If we look at what's trending, it goes up a bit. If we look at the job part, then where the hell's that shot to? Has that just gone off right down here? So yeah, it's an interesting one to look at alongside all the others. So now actual resources themselves. So yeah, number one place you should always go when you're doing the language is find the main website. So this is the main website. And don't forget, I've deliberately not gone into too much detail about the language itself. And you can, if you know, a good place to start before you even go down the website rabbit hole is maybe just to read through the Wikipedia article to get a good overview, but there's good overviews on here as well, and I'll include links to all of these. So we've got the getting started, which is always a great place to start. There is a version 4, I think, of the book now, but there is the official reference manual as well. So this is the page for the releases where you get your binaries from. Okay. There's also installation instructions as well about how to set it up. But if you go back to the various parts here, you can see, there is a section here on installing. But you can still also use things to use like the live demo as well, which is great. And it mentions some, IDEs here as well. At some point I'll do an episode about, as I've done in the past. I did it with, I think, Erlang, where I sort of showed my procedure for setting a programming language up in, say, Visual Studio Code. So I'll definitely do a video about that once I've set up several of my systems, because I always like to do several and just check to see if there's any discrepancies between different installations. There's various ways you can try Lua out. Of course, you can use Tutorials Point. They have pretty good compilers and terminals on there, but there's other things as well. I'll include a link to that. So this is the first edition. So if you want a free resource, a programming book that's a free resource, there is the first edition. It was aimed at Lua 5.0. There is a more up-to-date current version as well, Programming in Lua 4th edition, which came out in 2016. So it's quite good because this gives you some idea of when they came out. So this one came out 2003. Most recent one came out in 2016, also available as an ebook. And it updates Lua to 5.3. But there is a 5.3 reference manual. So you can go old school, as I like to think of it, and just read the reference manual. And, it's not too bad. Yeah. I have learnt languages through the reference manual myself. And in fact, I suppose when I think about it, in the early days of learning Basic, it was a combination of class and the reference manual. I don't remember having a textbook to lay out the language. That didn't come till later. So yeah. But yeah, that would be it's a bit of a slog though with the reference manual. That's the only thing, just because there's so much information there. You could try out Tutorials Point. With any of these online resources, obviously there's always the danger that they can get out of date. But what I normally find is if you're going through these alongside some sort of coding environment that has a linter in it or something that can check your syntax, and as you start to run the code, you can normally tell if there's something amiss. For a good example of that actually is when I was using the 7 programs in 7 weeks, I ran into a real problem when I got to the section, I think it was on Scala, and I was finding it really tough because the book had been written in quite a different version, and but in the process of clearing my code up to work in the newer version and also using an online resource, I was actually able to use the Scala website actually, which is very well written for learning, and I actually end up learning a lot more. So that's how I deal with it. It's basically what I do is I have some additional resource that allows me to cross-check stuff as well. That's why I tend to like to work with more than one resource as well. So yeah, you can work through this. They also have a quick guide, which is the this sort of early chapters all sort of condensed together as a single stream of consciousness. And there's all sort of code examples you can work through here. But as you probably noticed, the website itself referenced the compiler on here as well. And some of the examples are just set up to automatically run in that as you sort of click on them. There we go. You got run and edit, open compiler. And you get taken out to the Tutorials Point online compiler. So that's quite handy. There is some stuff on exorcism, and as of some languages on exorcism, there's a ton of stuff. Other ones, not so much. There is actually 113 exercises on here. So if you want to go somewhere to sort of practice some challenges, to do different, generally the sort of things that coding challenges will get you to do, the usual suspects. And so it get you writing things like functions and sections of code that it then runs automatic checking on, like computerized testing and stuff like that, to make sure you got it right. But I did notice on here the learning resources, there were only 3 areas that covers, but it does have 113 practice exercises. In terms of the video content, I mean, what I did notice was this. So there's a conference on here by one of the founders of the language. So if we go back, you'll see, if we go up there, where are we? And you can see there. Yeah. From 2022, which was actually on the D Language Foundation website. So he was talking at the D language. And he was talking about companion languages for Lua. But the first part of the talk talks about main features of Lua, and then the second part talks about Peiling, I think that is. So yeah, check that out. Also, there's 4 videos on what seems to be his own YouTube channel from, well, they were put up about, I don't know when they were recorded, but they seem to be only a year old. He's talking about a few concepts here. And then there is actually a channel called Lua Workshop, which hasn't had anything uploaded for about 6 years. But there's a number of interesting workshop videos here from 2017. Then going back, there's 50 videos on here. So yeah, but like I said, I did find it difficult with these. It's quite nice to just dive in and see what impression you get straight away from resources on YouTube, and it didn't, they weren't, I mean, there's saying that, there's obviously a number of people that have done Lua courses on YouTube, so yeah, there's those, which is fine. What I'm more after in this section is people that are sort of actively involved with the development of the language, those talks. Okay, so when I get onto this section in all these resources videos, I tend to be not talking so much about tutorials. I tend to be more talking about videos by either the creators of the language or people that are involved in, various workshops and conventions, stuff like that, because it presents an interesting sort of line of sight onto a language by doing that. So yeah, if you go out and search YouTube for Lua tutorials, there's a shed load. If you search out for sort of interviews with the developers, they're a little harder to find and they're a little bit older. So anyway, I think I'm going to end it there. Hopefully this is sort of useful information for anybody that's sort of teetering on learning about Lua. And certainly you'll probably hear more about it on the channel over the coming days, weeks and months as I work my way through my new book, this one here. Thanks for watching, bye for now, and I will catch you in a future video.